everybody. Debbie Adam. Hello, how are you? It's a very big honour and privilege to be invited to come and talk to you today about the integrated services response for Cherbourg. Before I start, I'd like to also acknowledge the traditional owners of this land and the elders, both past and present, and the elders in the room. I'd also acknowledge the attendance of the Cherbourg Bereavement Justice Group and the chairperson and Elder Bevan Costello, Brother Les Stewart from Mergen, who carry the banner for domestic violence programs within the South Burnett. As you've heard from my bio, I didn't think I had that much experience, but as the sister said this morning, a long time ago when I first started working with Indigenous blackfoot organisations, there needed to be some changes. Just a bit about me. So I moved up to the big end of town. I went to work to try and see if I could influence and make changes. I've been there for a while, but I've never left home. My heart has never left home. I am a Mackay boy, and I've been a blackfella for longer than I've been a public servant. So I just want you to know that. Look, the integrated services response is all about exactly that. Integrated services response. The Queensland Government has a very strong commitment to domestic violence across the state. Our role at Cherbourg is identified as an Indigenous discrete community, bearing in mind that two key elements for the whole integrated services response is safety is paramount for our families and our friends, but it's also to have the perpetrators recognise and take accountability for their actions. And Cathy will, because she's a bit more learned than I am about what Honourable Quentin Bryce said back in 2015 about the not now, not ever legislation. But I'm here to tell you how we, as the integrated services response in Cherbourg, are slowly coming together. We started in January this year. It's taken us almost 5 months to develop a team together to work on the integrated services response. It's all about getting different agencies to work together collaboratively. Our speaker this morning and Brother Ed here talked about, and every so often you'd hear that word, collaboration, togetherness, support, integration. That's what we need if we're going to defeat domestic violence. We all need to work together. And after working with Indigenous agencies right across the country and being in Cherbourg for 10 years, and previously to that as part of my ATSIC role, it's all about working together. We all have our little silos, as people call them, our little hubs, our little organisations, and we all do a specific thing about domestic violence, alcohol, health, whatever. In order for us to defeat this beast, domestic violence, we have to come together. We have to be integrated. We have to work together. My job as the integration manager at Cherbourg is not to tell the services how to do your job, because you do it quite well. My job at Cherbourg is integrating the government agencies to effectively work together so that we can quicken the process of information sharing. Information sharing is a really big thing about government. We need to come together to share information so we can support agencies on the ground to do their job better. Sister said this morning, we need to work together. I agree. We have to work together, government and NGOs. I know from my Cherbourg experience that the services that are on the ground do the best they can with the resources they have. My job is try to integrate government agencies to deliver the message and get it back up the level. so that people recognise that we do need more support in this area. You are the experts in your domestic violence fields. We, me, and my team, the HRT team, which is another part of the integrated services response, come together to take that information and send it up the line. It's a difficult process because government is full of process, we know that. And it takes time. I have to make sure that when we roll out our HRT program, that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed. Because if I can't do it right, someone's going to die. It's all about creating that safe environment for our victims and accountability for our perpetrators. We need to educate our perpetrators, but we also need to create that safety environment for the families and the victims. You know, it was, when I got up here, I thought, and I heard Eddie speak and Sister this morning, it was all about me. It's not all about me, it's all about what I can do as a little fish in that big pond of domestic violence. If I can help and gather a lot of little fish together, if anybody's seen Nemo, all those fish pull that boat down and break. That's what we need to do. We need to work together so that at the end of the day, we can defeat this beast of domestic violence. It has been a long, hard road for me, and I'm so pleased and proud to have young people step up to the mic and work in this field so that when I retire and when they lay me down, I can say, well, I did a bit, and I've now got the confidence in young people like Eddie and others in the room to carry that banner. That's about it for me. I think Cathy's got Cathy's got a presentation, a slide projection there. When you have a look at it, note, it's all about integration of services, how we can work together. We're not coming to tell you how to do your business because you know. We want you to tell us how you can do it better so we can take it away and talk to people about improving. In this instance, you've got to remember, this is a trial. So the trial is about gathering stuff so that we can make the service better. We talk to community, we talk to elders, we go to schools, I hear a lot of stuff about what's going on out there, and I take it back and I feed it up down the chain. So government is listening, and hopefully they will come that day will come along and give us all the solutions that we need. In closing, I do have my counterpart integration managers here. I have Nikki Rowe at the back from Mount Isa. So those people, stand up, Nikki, don't be shy. I'm up there, you're down there. Now, Nikki's the integration manager working out of Mount Isa, so for any of those agencies or organisations that fall into her patch, if you want to make yourself welcome to, or introduce yourself to Nikki. And we have Rebecca over here somewhere. Stand up, don't be shy. Rebecca is from our Logan B. Lee. And my counterpart, co-manager, don't shake your head, Leanne, stand up. Leanne is in Rockhampton. We also got to remember that the integration services response are government funded. So I'm asking that when you go back to your respective agencies, that you start those conversations with your respective agencies about how you can defeat domestic violence or how you can make it work better for you. Funding is becoming available to other sites, and Cathy will tell you about the other sites shortly, about how they're going to roll up. But there's nothing stopping agencies from having those conversations with those respective government agencies so that we can deliver and develop those relationships for the integrated services response. And I must say that Leanne Simpson from Rockhampton is the only one out of the four of us whose agencies aren't being funded to do it. They've started their process and it's working reasonably or quite well, I believe, in Rockhampton. So there's nothing stopping community agencies to approach their respective agencies to start talking about integration services response. In conclusion, I suppose I'm not as flashy as Brother Eddie, but Domestic violence is all about having practical solutions, and all those practical solutions come from each and every one of us, individually, as a group, to feed it up so that government can understand and listen to exactly what we have to say about defeating domestic violence. And that's it. I'll hand you over to Cathy now. She's got some slides for you to have a look at. Thank you.
I'll try not to cover the same ground that Ed and Clowry have covered, but so apologies for any repetition. As Ed said, the Special Task Force did recommend that government develop, trial and evaluated integrated service response models. And I have to remember to do this. Okay. I guess there's the integrated services response area that I and Clowry and the other integration managers are implementing does it so with reference to a specific number of those 140 recommendations. Number 9 in particular is probably one that you're familiar with, because that does talk about the place-based, culturally appropriate, integrated response to DFV in discrete communities. It talks about the expanded roles of community justice groups, and it talks about increased funding for community-driven and holistic responses for Indigenous male perpetrators. We cover a number of other recommendations. Many of this is not new ground. Many of you would have participated in the work going back to the days of Bonnie Robertson and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Women's Task Force. I would just hope that we keep moving forward with this, even though at times it feels like one step forward and 2 steps back. The recommendations that we work cover the 3 integrated service response trial locations. It covers the need to evaluate what we're doing, the development of common risk assessment and safety management framework, the establishment of high-risk teams, information sharing, legislative changes and guidelines, and the co-design of tools. What is an integrated service response to DFV? Clowry's talked about that far more eloquently than I can, but it is about that continuum of services from networks through to co-location of services. And the work that we're doing is really about that end of the co-location. It's about working really differently, of not the same old, and it really is hard work. And I think I can't stress that enough, but it's probably not news to you either. It is hard work. It is about trust. It is about relationships, and that's not easy. It is, for many of us, also about listening, and not forget to go back and listen again. We operate around a shared set of principles in integrated service, and whilst there are a number of them outlined, the ones that I guess are very key to us is that the safety of women and children is paramount, that perpetrators are held to account and kept in view, and we're not just talking about a criminal justice response when we talk about accountability, that we develop a shared language around risk so that we do understand what each other are talking about, particularly when we start talking about high risk, because it means different things to different people, and because of that lack of understanding, often we do see really serious harm and death, because people do have a different understanding and a different way of assessing risk. Integrated responses require active leadership and really robust governance. And I don't just mean that in white-fella terms either. For us, these models are being developed around true leadership and authority within communities to make this work. Key features requires clear referral pathways and processes that are locally designed and that work for the place which is developing them. A common risk assessment framework and tools. And I'll talk a bit more about that, but many of you would have participated in the workshops and the consultations that ANRO's, Australia's National Research Organisation for Women's Safety, held around the state. I know they held forums up here, as well as in many other places, culminating in a workshop in in Brisbane, and we've been lucky enough to, to use that as the basis for our work going forward. A feature of the work that we're doing is around multi-agency high-risk responses, information sharing. People would be aware that there was changes made to the Domestic and Family Violence Protection Act last year in October. Those amendments around information sharing will come into effect on the 30th of May this year, so at the end of this month. And that really changes the way in which people can come together and share information in quite a different way to what they have been previously. And I hope people will feel far more confident and comfortable about sharing information that is relevant. And it's relevant for assessing the threat of serious harm and death. It's also relevant to managing serious harm and threat, and that this can be done without people's consent. I guess what we'd be trying to say is that we're not focusing so much on people not consenting to their information shared, but in people understanding that information is being shared to keep them and their families safe. What will it look like in Queensland? It'll look like service providers working together to share information about victims, about perpetrators and their children, but in accordance with relevant legislation, that they'll develop collaborative safety interventions for victims and their children, reduce the secondary victimisation that occurs when people have got to tell their same story and their same information over and over again to different people, and that will hold perpetrators to account but also provide opportunities for them to change their behaviour. The purpose of high-risk teams are central to the integrated responses to DFE, and the primary aim is to increase safety of victims and their children and to manage the high risk posed by perpetrators. It provides a forum for appropriate information sharing, comprehensive risk assessments and informed safety planning, and it enables swift and flexible actions. I would really encourage you to talk with Clowry, to talk with Nikki and Rebecca about how things are developing in their locations. Rebecca from Logan and Beanley, their high-risk team has been operating for a little while now, and we're hearing really positive and good things coming out of that, where people are sharing information and feeling that they are able to take very swift action at times that do save people's lives. It increases agency accountability. We hold each other to account as we are held to account by community, and deliver coordinated, consistent and timely responses. So who was funded to be on these high-risk teams? The Queensland Police Service have been funded, the Department of Justice and Attorney Generals through both their corrections, youth justice and courts areas. There is a position for a child safety person who is looking out for the safety of children on that team. The Department of Housing and Public Works, as we know, the lack of available emergency accommodation can be, a matter of life and death in many, many circumstances. The lead case manager is the DFE specialist service for that location, and they play a really critical role in the high-risk team. Queensland Health are also on that team, however, unfortunately for them, government had decided that they obviously did have enough money and didn't give them any additional funds. There was funding made available in 2016-17 budget, 26.3 million over 4 years for 8 specialist high-risk teams. In 2016-17, we started with Logan, Beanley, Mount Isa and Cherbourg. In 2017-18, it's Cairns, Mossman region, Brisbane and Ipswich. For those areas, integration managers will be appointed to the Department of Communities, Child Safety and Disability Services to be a pivotal point, I guess, and that funding will come into play from the start of the next financial year, and then gradually funding for those positions on the high-risk teams in the other agencies and for the domestic and family violence specialist service will come into play. In 2018-19, it's Mackay, Whitsunday and Moreton Bay regions. And as Clowry said before, we're well aware that in many regions around Queensland, people are already working together to try and bring about change through an integrated response or a case coordination response. It's called different things in different areas, but I think we're all trying to do the same thing. What's central to the integrated service responses is the co-design work. It does need to be a place-based model. They will look different to each other. They'll have some same core features, but they need to develop in a way that is informed by their local communities and that is going to work for their local communities. And as we know, that's very different from place to place, not just between Cherbourg and Mount Isa and Logan and Bentley, but all around this state. There's co-design of common components in place. So the work that Anne-Rose did in developing a common risk and safety framework, as well as a number of professional tools and supports for people, will greatly inform this trial. They're close to finalisation and will be in use in our 3 trial locations. We are hopeful that they will be available to everybody else to use if you so wish, but in our trial locations, that is what people will be using. And this is a real first in Queensland to be using a common risk assessment framework, and we do think that this is going to make a real difference. It is a trial though, and we also acknowledge we're probably not going to get it right from the start, but the purpose of a trial is to test new things and to be able to change and adapt those to ensure that they work along the way. We have a training plan in place, so when the new information sharing amendments to the Act come into play, we have dedicated training in the first tranche in our trial sites, but this legislation applies across Queensland and there will be broader training and information rolling out to ensure that people understand this new way of sharing information and particularly, I guess, ensure that people feel confident and know that the information that they're sharing is relevant information and that it is respecting people's privacy. This legislation operates alongside the Information Privacy Act, as well as a range of other legislation that applies to different organisations and different people. There is funding going into broader capacity building and professional development right across the DFE sector. We're developing an information technology support system to help the trial locations and ultimately, possibly more broadly, help them share information, help them be able to meet quickly, to do their business more quickly, because the level and volume of cases that they are going to be working with is quite daunting. I guess, as we all know, we know the prevalence of very serious DFE in our communities. What we're doing is being evaluated along the way, and the first stage evaluation undertaken by CIDFA, who've been contracted for this, is a developmental evaluation to help inform us about how things are going to date, what's working well, what's not, what we may need to adapt going forward. Clowry's already introduced our integration managers, but I've got their email addresses and phone numbers up there if people want to take photos of it or write it down, so you can make sure that if there's more information you want from them, you can do that. And similarly, I've put mine and my teams up there as well, so that I'm more than happy for you to contact us via any means in order to find out more about integrated service response, the trials, and how we're working in your area. Thank you.